1800s and you're a scientist named Guillaume Dutchine. You're studying a young boy, no older than 2 years old, who seems to have complete wasting of all his skeletal muscles. You have no idea what the disease is, what it's caused by, or what to call it. Fast forward to 2016, we now have 9 different types of the same disease, but with many more cure options available. What he originally discovered is what we now know as Dutchine muscular dystrophy. And alongside Becker, which we'll be talking about soon, is our topic today on Good Morning Bio 101. Now, a lot of y'all might be asking, what is muscular dystrophy? Well, the National Library of Medicine characterizes muscular dystrophies as a group of genetic conditions that progressively atrophy the muscles in the body. Now, when you look at Becker and when you look at Dutchine, these two are primarily affected by those that affect the skeletal muscles and the cardiac muscles. Now, that might not make perfect sense now, but let me further explain. If the skeletal muscles, which are the muscles that cover your bones, and your cardiac muscle, which is the one in your heart, don't work properly, you're going to have trouble walking and having your heart beating. Now, that sounds really bad, and the truth is that it is. So the reason that this happens is there's a specific gene in the body known as DMD that's not coded for when muscular dystrophy is present. So the actual name for this is dystrophin, and as a specific karyotype, it just happens to be missing. Now, this gene is one of the largest genes going throughout the entire body, coding for a huge amount of genetic material. When it's missing, the results can be rather scary. So there's 2 different types, the Dutchine and the Becker. Now, what are the actual differences between Dutchine and Becker? Well, we have this chart to show. So with Becker, it's characterized by small amounts of DMD being missing throughout the entire body. So even though this will show atrophy, meaning muscle weakness at a very young age, relatively 7 years old, it's still not going to be nearly as bad as a Dutchine form. Now, the lifespan of people with Becker muscular dystrophy are going to be still up into their late 40s. This is due to the fact that the body can still work with those small amounts of DMD, even if they are shorter and not even able to code for as much. However, Dutchine is a little bit different. There's almost no DMD found throughout the entire body, and it's usually discovered at the age of 2 due to the severeness of Dutchine muscular dystrophy. Now, unfortunately, this often leads to a lifespan only into their 20s, and they pass away at a very young age because their heart goes into that cardiomyopathy much sooner. Now, cardiomyopathy is caused by those cardiac muscles overswelling and trying to overcompensate for the fact that the blood's not being able to be pumped properly. When this happens, the patient will typically stroke out due to the fact that their brain's not getting that oxygen-rich blood, and their muscles will continue to atrophy over time due to the fact that they're also not getting the proper blood. So clinical symptoms or clinical presentations often look something like this in either case. So what we can see here is the abdomen is actually going to be pursed out due to the fact that the back muscles are not going to be as strong, and oftentimes the patient will walk on their balls of their toes just so that way they'll be able to support themselves. Their neck will be lurched forward and their shoulders lurched back, along with their butt being pushed backwards also. And they're going to be extremely skinny looking and look like they have almost no muscle at all due to this DMD gene not being coded for. Now, a lot of y'all might be hearing cardiomyopathy, DMD, Dutchine, and think you're going to catch something when you walk out the door if you see someone with this disease. Well, I'm here to assure you that that's not the case, and that's not how these diseases are spread. It's caused by something in your genetics known as an X-linked recessive disorder, and that might not make sense yet, but just give me a second. So if you had a mother who was a carrier of Dutchine or Becker muscular dystrophy, she would have been passed on by her mother. Now, here we have a typical male and a carrier female. When this happens, there's a 1 in 4 chance that the girl is going to be unaffected. There's a 1 in 4 chance that the daughter is going to be a carrier, a 1 in 4 chance that the boy is not going to be affected, and a 1 in 4 chance that the boy is going to be affected. Now, some of you might look at that and say, well, she has one of the affected, and she has one of the affected, and why is she just carrying, and why does he actually have it? So an X-linked recessive disorder happens to affect males more often because they don't have that extra X gene to actually cover up the disease in the body. So Dutchine is coded on both X's, and for that reason it doesn't actually affect females nearly as bad as it affects males. Now, there have been studies in the Netherlands looking at carriers of the Dutchine and Becker gene and saying that they still actually exhibit some of these symptoms caused by Dutchine and Becker muscular dystrophy. Now, all these studies are scientifically proven. For the most part, I think it was roughly 80% of these women who are just carriers do not experience the symptoms and will actually be okay and never know that they're even a carrier of either dystrophy. So before the child even actually ends up at the doctor's office, the parents are the first ones to notice minor symptoms that might not line up with typical child's growth. In Duchenne forms, what they might see is the calves swelling to abnormally large sizes, and that's because the muscle is trying to compensate for the fact that it actually can't grow properly. It's often called false muscle. This is usually observed around the age of 2 and will continue until later ages, up until their passing. With Becker, it's a little bit different. At about the age of 7 is when the symptoms are really typically known, because it's that progressive muscle weakness rather than that all at once not having that DMD gene. Once the symptoms are realized, they're taken to the doctor by the parents, and the doctor's going to be looking for 2 main things. One is the abnormal waddle caused by the fact that there's no muscle for the patient to actually have to help them walk. So the diagram earlier showed the abdomen being pursed out and them walking on their toes, kind of like that. After this is seen and shown, the doctor might opt for a blood test, genetic counseling, or a muscle biopsy, and any of these 3 options are typically used to diagnose the disorder. With a blood test, they're going to be checking to see if the DMD gene was coded for properly, and if not, they can determine whether it was Becker or Duchenne or even one of the other 9 types of muscular dystrophy. Now, if they were to do a muscle biopsy, when they cut open the muscle and look at it, they can see if there's the DMD gene actually coded for in that dystrophin in the muscle. If there's very small amounts, they're typically going to code that for being Becker rather than Duchenne, and if it's not there at all, it's going to be Duchenne. Continuing from that with the genetic counseling option, this is typically done after the fact when it's realized that either a parent might have been a carrier, or after the parent was the carrier, if they had a daughter who was older and a son who was affected, they're going to want to use genetic counseling to figure out if she also was a carrier of this disease. So muscular dystrophy, specifically Becker, isn't going to be mixed up with a lot of different diseases. The reason being is that Becker muscular dystrophy is observed at a very young age, about 7 years old, whereas diseases that mimic the symptoms such as ALS or polymyositis aren't going to be seen until later into the 30s and even the 60s. So there's really no reason for concern with mixing up the diagnosis. So continuing with the societal impact of this disease, people are going to be affected are always primarily going to be men due to that X-linked recessive pattern. As far as how long they're going to have the disease is going to be for the entirety of their life, it's not something that we quite have a cure for yet, but we do have treatments in the future to make it better. But we'll get into that later. So roughly 200,000 people are affected with this disease every year, which is not statistically significant, but that's 200,000 lives that are ravaged by the disease, and that pushes science to want to work towards a cure. So the societal impact of this has been, science has been able to further understand something that they didn't quite necessarily understand 25 years ago. With that, it pushes us to understand other diseases that might not be related to muscular dystrophy directly, but with the treatments that we found out, being exon skipping, we're able to apply those to other diseases and therefore further society as a whole rather than just focusing on one disease. So that's the beautiful thing about it. Now, as far as cost of living, the real issue and the reason that science chooses to look into a disease like muscular dystrophy would because it's so hurtful on the lives of those who have it. Those who have Becker muscular dystrophy are going to have roughly $50,000 extra of expenses in their life, and those with Duchenne are going to have roughly $80,000. And for even the average American or the above average American, that's extremely hard to pay, and there's no need for us to have things like this that are going to hurt people's lives when we can try our best to make it better through science, research, and developing new cures. So the quality of life for people with Duchenne and with Becker. Duchenne, it's not a great life to have at all, really. About 94% were unmarried and don't have any children. They don't have a good job that they're able to pay for their cure for. They really feel like a burden due to this inability to live their life. However, Becker's just a little bit different. Even though they still end up paying a significant amount of money for them actually to have this disease, about 50% were married or had a partner. Some of them had decent paying jobs, and a person that I personally know with muscular dystrophy Becker that works as a pharmacist making great money, and they're able to do that throughout their life. Now, so over the years, we've found 3 different treatments that can help to work against Becker and Duchenne muscular dystrophy. So So the first one that we have is gene transfer. So by using viruses, which are notoriously bad, we can take them and recode their genetic coding that normally gives you a bad, harmful virus. Well, we took that and we replaced it with normal human DNA, and we can use that to actually infect the mutated cells within the body that have DMD lacking. And from there, it's actually able to correct all the cells and help out the body. Now, what ends up happening with the problem is that the virus can't hold enough information for it actually to code for all those genes, and the body won't accept it. So oftentimes, we're not able to work through it. So we've tried microdosing over the years and nanodosing, but it doesn't seem to be looking favorably. So they moved on to other options, such as stem cells, which are notorious for being just the best thing ever, fix absolutely everything, except for their huge controversy that's actually behind them. Unfortunately, when it comes to a full-body disease, such as Becker-Duchenne muscular dystrophy, you'd have to grow an entire new muscular system and have it placed onto a different body. So the challenge comes with, they can grow those small patches of muscular DNA with the Duchenne being missing, so they're having the actual DMD gene in it. But unfortunately, they can't grow enough, or it would take too long and be too cost ineffective. However, the one that seems to be working the best is exon skipping right now. So the way that works is it looks at that genetic coding that's missing the DMD, and the actual reason that it's missing is because it's coded improperly. So you can think of it as the actual codons as 3 little word segments that code for a specific protein. So the dog ate the cat. When the body reads the dog ate the cat, it knows the code for that specific DMD protein. But what happens with Duchenne muscular dystrophy is we pretend like that T is missing, and then the new message is "Head orta teg hic at," and the body doesn't know what to do with that, and it won't code for dystrophin. So that completely ruins the entire muscular system, and it causes that horrible hereditary genetic disease. However, with exon skipping, what it does is it would cut out the unnecessary words right there, and from there it would become "dog ate the cat." Now that doesn't make as much sense, but that's essentially what Becker muscular dystrophy is going to be. So by doing exon skipping, it doesn't necessarily completely get rid of the disease, but over time we're going to be able to make Duchenne more like Becker, and with the Becker lifestyle that they can still have is live a full, normal, happy life. And that's pretty much all that I have on muscular dystrophy, Becker, and Duchenne. If there's any questions, leave them in the comments below. Like, rate, subscribe, and thanks for watching.